Okay. Thank you guys for having us today. I'm Hunter with Rose Restoration, and we're going to talk about the services that Rose Restoration offers and go through some concrete polishing and processing um, slides that kind of educate more about concrete polishing and the services that we do with concrete. So we're a local business. We're in Fairfax, Virginia. We've been in business for over 30 years. We have a lot of staff members on our team that have been with the company 10, 20, and a couple guys that have been with the company for over 30 years. We pride ourselves in giving our guys the best equipment, having the highest trained technicians, and using the highest quality products. At Rose Restoration, we offer many different services, and to many different people, we're known for different services. So a large part of what this presentation will do today is it will go over all of the different things that we do and all the different services that we do, because sometimes we are known as a concrete polishing company, sometimes we're known as a masonry restoration company, and sometimes we're known as the marble polishing guys. And we live in all three of those worlds, so it's important to educate our clients on all the different services that we offer. So here on this circle, you see the four main areas that we operate in. Historically, we're a natural stone restoration company, so we do cleaning, honing, polishing, sealing, repairs, tile replacements of natural stone. That would be countertops, floors, interior, exterior, really anything natural stone that's not installing it new is kind of where we started from. And then from the natural stone service world, we got into terrazzo, wood and metal, and eventually into concrete polishing. So terrazzo is a combination of marble and concrete, and then wood and metal refinishing repairs we do to compete with the architectural services companies that they maintain hotels and office buildings, that sort of thing. So we offer metal and wood to go along with our natural stone. And then Rose Restoration has evolved over the last probably 15 years to become heavily involved in the concrete grinding, polishing world, which we also do epoxy floors and that sort of thing. And then terrazzo being a combination of stone and concrete, we do a lot of terrazzo repairs, stripping, refinishing, repolishing, and all those sort of things. So these are kind of the four different areas that we operate in. Focusing on natural stone, specifically marble polishing, you use diamond abrasive pads. Diamonds are to stone what sandpaper is to wood. And so we go in and we clean the marble, remove any foreign matter, and then we wet sand the floors, taking out any scratches and damage, any surface imperfections, and then we repolish the stone by going through different grits of diamond pads, just like you'd go through different grits of sandpaper on wood, polish it, seal it, and that sort of thing. And then along with all of our polishing and cleaning and sealing, we can do any sort of repairs that you need. So as far as like specialty repairs with special mortars and rebuilding anything inside or outside, or tile replacements or anything, Rose Restoration can do that for you. Along with the polishing and the repairs, we can do grout and caulk replacement, and we also offer slip prevention systems. So we have different things like anti-slip impregnators, and we have a chemical etching process that we do for porcelain and marble to make floors safer. So anything anti-slip or polishing or repairs in the stone world we handle. These are some examples of floors that we service. This is a floor that we rehoned to take scratches out of it. And then this is a dirty floor that we cleaned and repolished, which we've done many times. This is at the Four Seasons in Georgetown. Along with the interior stone, we can do anything exterior stone related or masonry related. So this is an example of a brick sidewalk that we dismantled, rebuilt, repointed, cleaned and sealed. This is the DC Convention Center where we were hired to wash all the stone exterior of it with specialty chemicals. This is outside of one of our maintenance clients, and they had a truck hit their wall, and they asked us if we could repair it. So we ordered specialty mortar for the limestone, specialty mortar for the granite, and rebuilt it, retooled it back in. So those are some examples of masonry restoration, cleaning of exteriors that we get into. So this slide's about terrazzo. Earlier I said we strip, clean, hone, polish, sealed terrazzo. So we go into the DC schools in the summer times with the general contractors companies, and we take the old historic terrazzo and strip all the years of buildup and wax and residue and dirt and grime and stuff off. We strip it all off, clean it, and then we wet sand those floors and repolish them. And more often than not, we're restoring these floors to a better condition than they've ever been, even originally. This is an example of terrazzo repairs that we did. There were 15, 20 holes, big holes, probably about that big, in this floor in the Mazda Gallery Mall in Bethesda, and they removed a Starbucks kiosk. There was a Starbucks here. And so we were hired by the general contractor to come in and match the 4 different colors of terrazzo. So we had those custom matched in a lab, and then we ordered all the materials for the 4 different colors. Then we cut out and prepared each hole that was in the floor. These are like pillars and drains that were in the Starbucks. And then we poured them back into the floor, ground them flat, blended them in, and repolished that floor. And that's what it looks like afterwards. So you can't tell that hole had this floor had all those holes in it. And then this is just an example of terrazzo polishing. Our metal team is pretty awesome. We can do any brass or stainless steel servicing that you need done, as far as removing scratches, changing the finish. You can take a polished brass and go to satin, or you can take a satin brass and you can use special acids to tarnish the brass and change the color. So you can take gold brass like this and turn it into like a very dark brown color and oxidize it, then neutralize it and lacquer it, and change the appearance completely. So we do any of the field oxidations, restoration, repainting the brass to put the black accents back in it, antiquing brass, anything stainless steel, brass, aluminum, we can help with, even as far as like repainting anodized aluminum window frames and door frames. We can repaint those for you. Along with the metal comes wood. So any wood touch-ups, repairs, refinishing, millwork. We do a lot of guest room furniture in hotels where we go in. We'll touch up all the desks or the bed frames or the bedside tables or the vanity tops. And we do a lot of like bar tops and elevator cab interiors where we're freshening them up, doing repairs and taking out the dings and scratches and that sort of thing. So that kind of ends the metal, terrazzo, wood, marble portion of our presentation. Now we're going to get into the concrete side of things, which in the general contractor world has become by far the most prevalent service that we offer. We're mostly known amongst general contractors as a concrete grinding and polishing company at this point, despite all of those other things that I told you before this slide. So when you get into concrete polishing, it's really concrete processing. So we can take a concrete floor where there's many different options we can give you. You don't necessarily have to polish it. So there's surface preparation, which would be taking a concrete floor that may have glue or mastic or thin set or old tile on it, or areas that have humps in them you need ground down. So as far as like taking these large grinders, we can do a lot of surface preparation things for general contractors. Like even if you're putting a different flooring in, it's not going to be polished concrete. We can help get that concrete underneath your flooring ready for you. And then moving into finished flooring solutions, we do concrete grinding, polishing, grind and seals. We dye floors. We do a lot of work with stencils, and then we've gotten into urethane epoxy, urethane cements, quartz floors, and all those other sort of floors. So any epoxy floors or resinous floors or kitchen floors, we can do now alongside of your concrete polishing. This is a picture of a floor that we ground polished, put down a stencil, and dyed that pattern into the concrete. And then this is just us grind. These are just pictures of us grinding. This is grinding glue and mastic off a floor, and this is just grinding the floor and maybe densifying it. So as far as the number one service that we offer in the concrete polishing world is concrete polishing. So concrete polishing is grinding and then refining a floor to a polished finish. You're mechanically polishing it. So what that means is you're achieving the shine by working through the different grits of diamond pads, just like you'd go through different grits of sandpaper on wood. And as you go from maybe a 200 grit to a 400 grit, you start to see more light reflection in the floor. So you see how you can clearly see that door reflected in that floor. At a 200 grit, you wouldn't be able to see that door, right? At a 400 grit, you would kind of start to be able to see a door. At an 800 or 1500 grit, you can clearly see the reflection of the door in the floor. As you go through the different grits of diamond pads, you're refining the floor and actually mechanically polishing it and getting it to be more shiny. You're not putting something on the floor that makes it shiny. You're refining the floor with diamond pads and making it polished, right? So that's how you polish concrete, as you go through the different grits. That's where a lot of the confusion in the industry comes into play, because somebody can take a floor, grind it, and put something shiny on the floor, and they'll call it polished concrete. That's not polished concrete. That's a grind and seal, putting something shiny on the floor. So that's why it's important to have some knowledge of the different systems and the different things you can do to a concrete floor, because you need to know what you're getting when you're being sold something in this industry. A couple of terms with concrete polishing. Burnishing is the final polishing machine. We use a burnisher. It's a 2000 RPM machine, which is much, much faster than all the other machines that we use. This is a burnisher, and that it heats up the guard and cures it and gives like a little final pop to the floor and makes it shiny. And then a guard is the product that you put on the floor before you burnish it. And that kind of helps you get a final sheen to it, and it gives you some protection. It's like a sealer almost. When you're grinding and polishing concrete, you have some options, and one of the options is, do you want to dye the floor? So when you've cut the floor with your first couple grit of diamonds and you've got it nice and profiled and cleaned up, and you've done about half the work, your concrete's in like a raw, chalky, open poured state. And what you can do is you take acetone and you mix it with a powdered dye in a pump sprayer, and you pump spray that on the floor. It absorbs into the floor, and what that does is, you see how you can still see all the rocks through it and everything. It's a transparent dye, right? It's not like putting paint on the floor. You can still see everything on the floor, but you're like dyeing the floor. That's why I keep saying dye versus stain, because when you're in the concrete polishing world, like, some people have concrete stains that are more of a paint product that's like a solid look, and I refer to these as dyes because they kind of dye the floor, but it's still, you can still see everything. You're still going to see the cracks, and you're still going to see all the aggregate in it. But this is an example of a sample that we did for a customer to show them the different colors. And this is an example of a black polished basement floor. These are examples of colors that we can dye your concrete floor. This is just a slide to reiterate the point that we can just take a concrete floor and grind it and clean it up without necessarily polishing it. So one thing that comes up a lot with polished concrete is patching and repairs. So often a polished concrete floor will kind of be defined, like how good it is going to be determined by how well you do things like patching. So at Rose Restoration, we have multiple different ways to patch a concrete floor, and they vary in price. There's different price considerations for that, and then there's other there's other considerations such as odor. You know, can you have something that smells in the building, or do you have to have something with no odor? Or is this in the front of the house in a hotel lobby and your patches have to be dead on? Or is this in the warehouse in the back and they don't care and you can just use rapid set? So depending on where this floor is, what the expectations of it are, what the budget is, what the space is, our sales team is going to help determine the best patching system for your job. So that's different than most other concrete companies, which may only do one of these four options. We try to focus on color matches, better repairs, higher quality results, and this is a good example of how we do that. When you're selling concrete floors, you have to be clear about what the expectation is, what the spec is, and a lot of our job is like educating people and kind of deciphering what they want versus what they've put in the plan. So these are the different options you have when you're talking about concrete polishing. One, how much grinding are you going to do on the front end of the job? If you grind into a concrete floor and you start grinding away the cream cap, you start exposing rocks and aggregate in the floor, and it changes the look of the floor. It'll go from like a solid gray color to looking what we call a salt and pepper floor. And if you grind even deeper, you'll start exposing the big rocks in the floor, and we'll call that a full aggregate exposure floor. There are three different looks that you can get depending on how deep into the concrete you grind with your first grit. The second option is how shiny do you want this floor? Are we going for a matte finish? We want more of a satin, not very shiny finish, or are we going as glossy as you can make that floor look? That, you know, you got to figure out what your customer wants. And then three, are you going to leave it the natural color? Are we going to dye it? These are kind of the three different things that you're going to try to figure out. Nathan figures out on a daily basis when he's pricing these jobs. This is a visualization of those things that I just said. Here, try to minimize your aggregate exposure, stay in the cream cap. Two, I want to grind into it. I don't want to see just a gray floor. I want some life to it. I want to see some little rocks in it. Three, grind it, expose the aggregate. I want it to look like a terrazzo floor, a giant piece of granite. And this is much more expensive to do, but it completely changes the look of the floor. And then down below here, we have, there's three different options. Do I want a matte floor? Do I want a satin floor? Or am I looking for a high gloss polish on my floor? We say you have to grind down before you can polish up. So you're grinding the floor down with your low grit diamonds, and then you're polishing the floor as you go up through the different grits of diamond pads. Some people think, you're grinding the floor, and the more you grind it, you're grinding, it gets polished, but you have to go up through the grits. This is a slide of some of the stencil work and dye work that we've done in the past. So this is a Google cafeteria off of the toll road in Ashburn that we did. And this is the dining room, and you can see the pizza oven here. This is where all the employees come in to get their food. So they spec this pattern into the floor to be dyed in the floor. And so we contract with a company that makes 4x8 panel stencils, right? And so we send them the artwork, and then they send us back the 4x8 panels, and they're numbered, so they go together. You have to line up this panel perfectly with that panel. You have to line up that panel perfectly with that panel. Otherwise, your pattern is going to be messed up. And so you put the stencil down, you pull the white backer off of it, and you leave the stencil down like that. And then you put your dye in your pump sprayer with your acetone, you spray over it, and then you pull the stencil off, and it leaves that dyed into the floor. And then you continue polishing, 400, 800 guard burnish, and it kind of locks it in. This is an example of a customer that wanted 4 different colors. The color of that concrete is the middle color where the plus is, right? And then this is what the concrete looked like originally with all the glue and mastic stuck to it. So we ground it off, taped it off, dyed the 4 samples, polished it up, and then the architect was able to make a choice what they wanted based off of that. And then this is an example of dyeing someone's logo. I think that was a hair salon or a barber shop, and we dyed their logo in their floor. during the job. So when you're value engineering a concrete floor, you don't want to pay for a polished floor. The lower cost option is just to grind it and seal it, right? Grind it, clean it up, get all the stuff off of it, get yourself to a clean polish or clean concrete floor, and then apply some sort of sealer to it. So this is that process. You remove anything on the floor, get it all cleaned up, grind it, typically up to a 200 grit, apply a guard or a sealer, and then if you guard it, you burnish it. Otherwise, you seal it, you just leave it alone. So that's like, the cheapest way to get a concrete floor, but not polishing it. The polishing process adds a couple steps into it. It adds the densification process and it adds the polishing process in, right? So you still get everything cleaned off the floor. You still grind it with your low grit diamonds. But when you're polishing a floor, you add densifying the floor. So at a 200 grit, you spray a chemical into the floor and it absorbs into the concrete. It makes it up to 5 times harder than the concrete is naturally, which makes it much more resistant to scratching. It makes it so that it won't dust. Like concrete will naturally let off dust. That's why if you go in like your basement that has an unfinished concrete floor, it'll be like dust all over everything. So the densifier helps prevent that. And then it hardens the concrete. So when we're polishing it, it allows us to get better results when we're polishing. So densification, polishing is going up through the higher grit diamonds. So with the grind and seal, you're stopping at a 200. With polishing, you're going to run an 800 grit or 400 grit, then an 800 grit, and maybe a 1500 grit. Rarely would you run a 3000 grit, but basically anything between 800 and 3000 is a polished concrete floor. And then you put a guard on it and burnish it with that high-speed machine that I showed you earlier. So that's the concrete polishing process. And then you got to keep in mind that grinding is probably 3 grits of diamonds and polishing is another 3 grits of diamonds. So there's, this is a 10-step process or something like that. This slide just talks about densification. I just said all these different things. It makes it so you can get a better shine. It makes the floor harder so it resists traffic, wear, and water better. It prevents it from dusting. You can densify a floor to rejection. So if you densify a floor and it's real thirsty, it soaks it up, you densify it again. You want to keep densifying it until it stops absorbing the densifier. That's how you do it. So this is a slide, going into the concrete polishing world. The next step naturally for us was to go into the resinous floor and coatings world. So, very often we're polishing concrete right next to an epoxy floor for a kitchen or something like that. So any flake floors, urethane cement floors, epoxy floors, quartz floors, we do in-house with our guys who are all trained to do it. And we've been doing it for years at this point. So these are just pictures of floors that we've been doing. I'll talk about this job real quick because at Rose Restoration, we have customers come to us with unique projects pretty often. So this project was in a historic building at the Marine Barracks downtown DC, and the customer wanted to salvage this mosaic floor that was found underneath a bunch of old flooring when the building was demoed and cleaned out. And so they asked us how to preserve this. And this floor extended to the walls. It was all broken up all around it. And the flooring all around that mat was actually down a couple inches from where it's at now. So I went to look at it, and the solution that we came up with was to trim this into a mat and then take all the damaged sections from the inside of the mat and remove them with a Dremel. And then we salvaged a bunch of these tiles that we took out from around the outside, salvaged them, cleaned them out, and then we stitched them back into that mosaic. And then we put a schluter around the outside of it, and then we poured self-leveling cement in all the way around it, and then we sanded that down and put a gray epoxy over the top of it. And so we kind of engineered this solution to make this like a historically salvaged floor for the for the Marines. So if you guys ever have any special projects you don't know what to do, we can come help you with maybe coming up with a solution. We do overlays and underlayments and floor leveling as well. So if you guys need any help with that, we can pour overlays. At Rose Restoration, we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that we're giving our guys the best vans, the best tooling, the best equipment. We invest in bigger, faster machines to give us more production. A good example of that is this trowel that we purchased recently. That's a $25,000 concrete polishing trowel. The beauty of that machine is that this machine will do 2.5 times in a day what that machine will do. So once we get into supermarkets or larger open spaces, this machine allows us to get down under $2 a square foot. Whereas with a machine like this, you're stuck at $3 to $4 a square foot. So you're able to take a crew and get much more out of it with one of these machines. And so at Rose Restoration, we're in the estimating process, we're pairing your job up with the most efficient machines and crew to bid it that way so that we can keep your bids as low as possible. In the concrete polishing world, we're polishing something that somebody else placed. So you're working with what you get, and your end results are determined often by the quality of the concrete or anything, what we inherit when we get the concrete to work on, right? So you can have concrete that was improperly mixed at the plant and it's spalling or it has surface imperfections or something weird. You can have finishing flaws where somebody like walked through it and left boot prints through it. Like you can grind and polish concrete, you'll see people's footprints through it sometimes, because if they walk through it at the end and then they go back and trowel over that, they've still pushed all those fines and aggregates down in there, right? So even if they go and fix it and trowel it back out, you can still see some of that stuff in your final product. Just like how they cure it, if they burn it too much when they're troweling it and all that sort of thing. Surface damage, concrete blankets. If you put a concrete curing blanket over a concrete to cure it because it's raining that day or something like that, when you pull that blanket off and we grind and polish it, you'll see where that blanket was on it because it'll cure differently where the plastic sits on it versus where it's like bubbled up. So you can actually stain the concrete with blankets. There's just all sort of things that are important to take into account, like when you're placing or finishing the concrete long before your concrete polishers come onto site. And that's just kind of what this slide is about. It's not a great example of a footprint, but normally, after you grind and polish, sometimes you'll see footprints in it from where somebody pushed the fines down in it. And this is an example of a job we did where we polished it, and these stains showed up after the polishing. These are stains because when this concrete was poured, they put plastic over it because it was raining, and anywhere where that plastic was touching was one color, and anywhere where it was bubbled up cured a different color because where the air pocket was cured differently than where there's no air pocket on top of it. So on that particular floor, we actually went in and ground that floor heavier, exposed more aggregate in it, but that fixed the problem of having those weird stains on it and repolished it. So the customer complained about that floor, and we said, we have a solution, but the solution is going to cause you to have more aggregate in this one room. And they had to weigh their options. Do I want to see the staining from the curing blankets, or do I want to see more stones in the floor? They chose more stones. We ground the floor, took all those marks out, provided them with a solution. They were happy. We were happy, and we explained up front that you're going to see more rocks in the floor, and that was the end of that problem. So we're experts at determining scope of works, and we're experts at kind of deciphering what somebody wants when they put that scope of work into the plans. And in our business, there's a lot of confusion, and not a lot of people know all the things that we just went through in this presentation. So the scope of works get messed up. Nathan's an expert in that. I'm an expert in that. Justin's an expert in that, and we can take what you've given us and help you work through it to make sure that you're getting what your customer is expecting and what they should be getting versus what maybe some confused person put into the plans at some point before we got a hold of it. So in conclusion, at Rose Restoration, we use all the best quality materials. We have the best technicians. We do things such as offering different patching systems to ensure the best quality results. We have an extensive expertise in stone restoration, which translates directly into our concrete polishing work, patches, hand machine work, blending edges and corners into the main body of the floor. It doesn't sound like a difficult thing to do, but a guy on a hand machine with 100 pounds of pressure versus 1,000 pounds on a floor grinder and trying to blend those two things in together is not an easy task. And if you've ever had a poor polished concrete job done for you, then you know what that looks like, because it looks like somebody went around the whole edge of the room with a hand machine, made a mess. And we have experienced crew leaders. We're not sending somebody who's been doing this for 6 months to your job. We're sending someone who's been doing this for a decade or 2 or 3 with experienced people. And that is our roadmap to quality results and kind of what makes Rose Restoration Rose Restoration. So that's the end of our slideshow today. If you guys have any questions, please go ahead and ask them. And thank you for your time today.